Good evening, everybody. I'm Barbara Cochran, Vice President for Continuing and Public Education at the New York Botanical Garden. So wonderful. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Landscape Design Portfolio Series and to this year's closing speaker of the series. It's gone by so quickly. Andrea Cochran, who joins us for tonight's talk, Immersive Landscapes. This year, the series is entering its third decade, and as pressure on our environment intensify, we feel we've established an important platform to address the responsibilities, concerns, and achievements of landscape designers around the world. I'd like to take a moment to thank Susan Cohen, who founded the series and has curated it since its inception. I would also like to thank Monica Heinbolt and her family for their generous support of this series. And Monica is with us tonight, so thank you, Monica. And of course, I would most like to thank you, the community of landscape architects, horticulturists, designers, plant people, and friends for supporting the portfolio for the past 21 years. So, Andrea Cochran grew up on the East Coast, but strongly identifies with the West Coast, and especially the microclimates of the San Francisco Bay Area, where she's lived and practiced for the last 30 plus years. Her work as Andrea Cochran Landscape Architecture seamlessly integrates landscape art and architecture using a controlled palette of materials to create permeable edges that blur the line between nature and built environment. This restrained approach heightens the design elements of texture, light, and movement, and reflects some of Andrea's key influences, the modernist landscape architects of the 1930s and the minimalist artists of the 60s and 70s. Andrea is a recipient of the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in Landscape and the ASLA Design Medal. Her firm has won honors too numerous to mention. In 2019 alone, and the year's not over yet, they've earned 6 awards, including 3 for the Helen Diller Civic Center Playgrounds in San Francisco and the Residential Design Award from AIA California for the Los Altos residents. We're delighted to have Andrea here with us this evening to share her insights into several projects that illustrate her unique approach to space, landscape, and design. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Andrea Cochran.
Thank you, Barbara. That was a great introduction, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight and escaping the fires of Northern California, having a little. I just want to say a little bit about my studio. We're 16 people in San Francisco, and it's really about half our work is high-end residential work, and the other half is a combination of affordable housing, hotels, wineries, parks, universities, the whole gamut of work. And we feel that one side of the practice feeds the other and helps build interesting and compelling projects. So it's just a little quick capsule of that. So I'm really also thrilled to be speaking at the Scandinavia House because my Danish grandparents lived in Jackson Heights, and they'd be so thrilled to know I was speaking at a Scandinavian house. So to start, I think Barbara kind of gave a good introduction. And in addition, when I think about our work, I think about creating space, which you can see in this slide, and the kind of permeable edges. But I think another thing that happens in landscape and, in landscape architecture is actually the choreography of movement through spaces. And that's something I'm going to talk about tonight to kind of tie together these disparate projects with a single thread. Early in my career, actually when I got out of graduate school, I went to Europe for the first time, and I went to Rome, and I visited a friend who was at the American Academy, and he suggested that I go to the Villa Giulia, which is an Etruscan museum that was built in the 1500s by Vignola. It's Renaissance, but in the late Renaissance Mannerist tradition, and in that part of the Renaissance, there was an interest in sort of tweaking your perception and kind of making you think about things, tweaking how spaces worked and how you move through space. So this became very interesting to me, and you can see way in the center, in the distance, there's a person standing there, but beyond that is a sculpture in a niche. And this was just a transformative experience to me, because what I realized is, as a designer, you could actually move people through space. You could force them to move in a way by choreographing by these gentle cues. So this is a kind of an axonometric of the space, and I'm just looking for the thing. Oh, there it is. So you come in here, that photo was taken right here. You see all the way back where the red line is shown, but when you walk here, you walk up these steps to this loggia, you realize there's a gallery of sort of as a depressed grotto almost. You kind of walk down there because it's interesting and there's water. Then you come out and you think, well, where am I supposed to go? And then you notice this doorway and you come out, you walk through a lovely garden, then you see this, and then you come back and you find your way. For me, this was really transformative in that I had never really thought before. I thought about making space and sort of defining space, but not really moving people through space. And I think what's interesting is that as you move through space, there's sort of a kinesiological connection to the ground. And we've heard studies that people actually learn more when they're moving. So there's a kind of a deeply emotional experience when you're moving through a space that's very different than when you're sitting in it. And a lot of landscape, you are moving through it rather than sitting in it. So this, I'm also, as Barbara mentioned, really interested in the artists, and especially the artists of the 60s and the 70s. And this is the spiral jetty, which I'm sure most of you have seen. And Richard Serra made the comment about this, that it's not this graphical thing that you see from the air. What it really was meant to be is walking along it. You can see little people in the middle there. So it was actually this sort of meditative experience of walking through the landscape that was really what that art piece was about. So the idea of moving through the landscape and the idea of choreography of movement was reinforced about 20 years ago when I was working at Oliver Ranch, which is a 100-acre sculpture a sculpture ranch. It's a 100-acre site with site-specific sculptures that have the likes of Richard Serra, Martin Puryear, very well-known sculptors. And this is a piece by Bruce Nauman, who I didn't realize that his work was largely about transformation and movement. So this piece actually covers 1/4 mile, and the tread width is the same at each step, but the riser height varies. So as it moves across this 1/4 mile, sometimes the stairs are quite high, and sometimes the stairs are actually, kind of almost flat. Sorry, I'm still working with this. Okay. So then this is my office there a number of years ago. And what was very interesting to me about this is you walk down the stairs. As the stairs get kind of high, you have to walk very carefully and you stop. And then you look out at this beautiful valley. So again, how you move through the space was choreographed very, very deliberately by the artist. We were asked to do a set of stairs leading to an artist-in-residence studio on the property. And so this is the studio, and it's 2 walls that are cut into this hillside, and you walk up. And there's a studio here, and a courtyard, and it's buried in the ground. So as you approached it, I just felt like the strong architectural move was very horizontal, that you didn't want to put a pathway going perpendicular. It seemed wrong. So the idea came to me that it should be very permeable and kind of duplicate the movement of the architecture. So this is one of the walls coming out, and as you can see, the hill goes up, and that stair goes to that high point. And then this is on the other side where it's coming out of the wall, and this is the wall's coming out of the ground. This is an art by David Rabinowitz that was incised into those walls. And then this is the stair that we did to these Corten steel strips that are just, we lightly graded the site and placed them in so that, and the gravel is the same color as our grasslands in the summertime. So when you look at it from the other side, it almost disappears. So it seemed that it was much more important to create something in the presence of such great art that was really recessive and allowed the art to be dominant. So about 4 years ago now, we were asked by an artist who had been asked to do a site-specific installation there if we would collaborate with him on the physical part of the piece. And this is the site, and his name's Doug Hall, and most of his work is not about sound, but this particular work is about sound, and it's based on the Trachycus of Wittgenstein, I can never say his name. Anyway, and it's a philosophical piece that was written in the middle of the last century that talks about language. And, you know, I have 2 degrees in landscape architecture. I don't know about philosophy, but I do know that that Doug said that, you know, it's about language, but also pre-language and how that all relates. So he decided that he was going to work with the San Francisco Girls Choir. And what was very interesting to have this piece where you'd walk through it and you'd be surrounded by the sound. And you will see as I go to the next slides that there are speakers hidden in the landscape. And as you're walking up, it's this almost a mystical experience, a metaphysical experience, where you hear these girls singing from these speakers that are embedded in the landscape. And it really is kind of almost eerie because you don't know where the sound's coming from. And it starts very loud, softly, and kind of goes into a crescendo. So this weekend when I went to the botanical garden, I noticed that I happened to show up on the day of Chorus in the Forest. So I just thought it was kind of an interesting overlap with what we were talking about here. So, so the idea is, this is the walkway here and these stairs. There are beautiful rocks. There's a beautiful rock formation that really was one of the reasons that we cited this here. And the idea was you would walk through this beautiful oak woodland landscape, come up, you would rest. We kind of carved out a flat area there. And then Doug, the artist, felt that it should feel like an intervention, like a modern intervention, and not feel very sort of too mystical. So this part is kind of more simple and quiet. And as you walk up, you see the rocks kind of tumbling through, which we actually moved rocks to make it look like nature, which is something I've never done before. And then you kind of come up here, and then you can walk down here, and then you can sit here and listen to the sounds quietly, and then you leave here, and then you walk to the next piece, which is around the bend. So these are the rocks, and they're so just, you know, beautiful in the springtime when they're covered with moss. And then as we, this is the springtime when we put the stair in. And what I didn't like about these photographs is that the grasses had grown so tall in the springtime you couldn't see the rocks. So I actually had it reshot later in the summer, and so this kind of will give you the experience of walking up. And I'll just be quiet and let this happen. And these are people leaving as they go to the left to the next piece. So what, you know, in moving these rocks, they feel like they've been there forever, but actually we actually did a fair amount of movement to give it that kind of rustic feeling. So this is kind of other end of the spectrum. This is a courtyard we did for UCSF in San Francisco, and this is a cardiovascular research building. And this is a research building. There's a cancer research building here. So the head researcher at the hospital, at this research facility, was very interested in creating collaboration between scientists, and he felt that scientists tend to be kind of self, you know, inwardly focused group and not really reaching out to other people. So he wanted to create social movements that would actually encourage people to meet. So that's the main stairway in the building. All the public spaces are off that stair, so if someone's walking up and down the stairs and having coffee, they might run into someone and come up with the next cure for whatever. So the idea was that we wanted to create this place of engagement, and so there's this, straight watch, from the campus right up to the front door, more meandering to the north side. This is the downtown San Francisco, and then, but really it was this idea of kind of this places where people could move around and find one another. The other inspiration was, when we work on residential projects, the narrative comes from the client. The client has a strong sense of how they want the landscape to be. But working on public projects, you have to develop a narrative that becomes more of a communal narrative. And so this narrative was really about restoring, or at least metaphorically, the sense of what had been there in the past. And so this was this area where the cancer, or the whole Mission Bay, where this cancer research, or the cancer research and the is located on filled land. So this is what that landscape looked like 100 years ago before it was filled in. So we wanted to bring, recreate a sense of that as we develop this landscape. So that was kind of a clue that it would be a more restorative kind of feeling. And then the other thing is, because they do cardiovascular research, this is an echocardiogram, and also kind of embedded in that, although I was told never to talk about it, it also is a seismograph. So the idea was that we could embed that kind of in the landscape. And the campus architect told us he wanted something romantic because some of the other spaces on campus were, they were too hardscape. And so this became my attempt at being romantic and sort of like overgrown and moving with the wind. So that's so the landscape is entirely made up of grasses, and they are planted in bands. So there's Deschampsia, Carl Forster, Callimgrostis Carl Forster. We have Juncus. We have Panicum. We have and Pennisetum. So they're all planted in bands, so they kind of layer up and you kind of meander through them. And also the entire thing, we have a shared sewage system in San Francisco where the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer are all combined. So and the drainage here was very poor, so this actually became a detention pond underneath us, 4 feet deep, that would hold all the water after a big rainstorm so that the effluent wouldn't be distributed into a bay. So embedded in this is kind of an environmental, strong environmental sustainable measure. This project had LEED Gold. And then the grasses in between are also these little meadow areas, are native California meadow grasses that also don't need to be mowed, and again are low maintenance and very sustainable, and they can withstand a drought. And then you can see we have these longer communal tables and then benches for people to sit, and then you can see this is in the fall with the different grasses kind of layering up, creating a sense of movement. And one of the things we have in San Francisco is, we can always count on the wind. Wind is our friend, and it's also our foe. I mean, it can be very cold in the summer, so shade here wasn't an issue. And we couldn't put trees on top of this recharge area. We had one tree. And, but the idea was that the movement of the grasses would be constantly telling you about your environment, and also they would be kind of creating this kind of like, in what could be a static landscape, I guess what you would call a sense of romantic or a sense of dynamic of landscape in something that's fairly simple design. And then in the evening, it's dotted with these little lights that kind of guide you through the landscape. The front of the building is very different. It's the front entrance to the campus, so it's kind of very civic in scale. We moved in these large palm trees, and they actually cross the street from the cardiovascular research building across the street. And then we actually made a building, I say in quotes, but this is a temporary power plant that's going to be in that space for like probably 15 years. And then they wanted so I wanted to create something that, until that new lab building came in and kind of bookended the Civic Center, the Cardiovascular Research Center. I wanted it to kind of bookend either side, so we planted these giant timber bamboo, and then in front of it we created this scrim, a fence that is, behind it there's actually a chain link fence. That's the real, security fence. But this actually creates a kind of a weight that's almost building light that kind of creates that layering that I think works really well to kind of create the other end and hold the weight of the entry sequence. We don't do many competitions, but we were asked to do a competition for this space that in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right across from the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh. And Jane Werner is a wonderful force that I think it's probably the best children's museum in the country. And she's also like single-handedly transforming this whole north side of Pittsburgh. And so this is the project after we built it. And you can see we worked with the artist Ned Kahn. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then this was the first Carnegie Library, and the Children's Museum is here. So it's a very important civic space, and this is what it looked like when we started. It was sadly, it had been since after the Revolutionary War, this area was laid out and given to Revolutionary War veterans as thanks for their service. And this square was the original town square. It was like the New England Green, and over the years, there was the marketplace, and it was a very strong civic space. And then they had urban renewal in the 60s and just destroyed the whole thing and built these very ugly buildings. And this plaza was, in shade. It's on the north side of this building, so it's sunny now, but this is taken in the summertime. So it was either boiling hot or freezing cold, and then homeless people were living under these overhangs. So the city couldn't really afford to maintain this fountain. It was going into disuse. It was really a horrible thing. So Jane raised the money. She raised $6 million to renovate the plaza, and the Children's Museum ran this competition. So we won the competition. We did a design, which was very fanciful and was great, a lot of kids stuff. And we went to the first public meeting, and the community hated it. And they said, and I think that's kind of an inherent problem with competitions because you're not working with a real client group. And so, so this is the plan. So this is the Children's Museum. And then this is at Carnegie Library. And these are the trees I photographed. And so this is before. And what it was, and so when we started meeting with people, they said, well, we want it to be like it used to be. And I was like, you weren't even alive then. And so, there was a fountain in the middle and then two pathways like this, a typical Victorian park. And that doesn't work for today's uses. So we came up with this idea after many, many public meetings where we still had 4 points of entry, one here, one here, one here, and one here, and a lot more green space, which it needed for a variety of reasons. And then we worked with Ned to create a sculpture that would be a real focal point for the park, but again, would be something that would change at different times of the day and different seasons and be really a dynamic piece. This is a rain garden here that's filtering all the water. We actually use a clover lawn as a lawn substitute to sort of feed itself and be less impactful on the environment. And then this is entirely, all the other plants are native to the Allegheny River Basin. So we truly tried to make this be of this place. And then there's these stone walls here that are from the Pennsylvania bluestone. So this is a view from above, looking at the landscape when it was first installed. And then this is Ned's piece. So he calls it Cloud Arbor. So this perfect ball of fog forms, and then it starts to dissipate across the landscape. And the landscape was designed to be really flexible so that they could have an art fair here or events, and then kids could eat their lunch here when they come for school trips to the museum. It also has become a really strong place for the community to walk through. So as I said, it's got these kind of cross paths that kind of crisscross in a historic way. But it also is a place that from early in the morning, when we took these photographs, I was there from dawn until dusk, and it was great to see the life of the park as people walk through it at all times of the day. The dog walkers, the joggers, the kids from the museum, and then again as it closed towards the evening. So this is the fog starting to dissipate over the landscape. after it's been, and then here's an event that with, you can see in front of the Children's Museum, they set up a bunch of tents. The kids go crazy here. They time it. They, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they realize it's not coming. Then they do it again. But they made up this whole game. But the thing is, you kind of disappear. And then these are two women sitting next to the rain garden, and you can see that for a moment you're transported into another place. You could be in the middle of, in the woods out here. So this, and I've seen, birds coming to feed on the flowers, and then you can see the grasses, the Joe Pye weed, kind of wandering through, and it takes on this kind of mystical character at different times of day. This is at night, someone leaving in the evening, and it's so much because we filled it in, because before it was cut 14 feet into the ground, we filled it in. It's much safer. You can see across it. You feel like, and it's well lit, so you feel really, really safe, and it is well lit at night, well used at night. So this is the children's, the Civic Center garden that Barbara mentioned earlier, and we were called by the Helen Diller Family Foundation, who was donating $10 million to the city of San Francisco to refurbish two parks that were at Civic Center. There was one here and one on the other corner of Civic Center Plaza. This plaza, it's one of our most important civic spaces in the city. It's a place where people come for rallies and for marches, but it's also inhabited by homeless people. We have a really, really terrible homeless problem in San Francisco, and every day they would come to the playgrounds and collect the needles, and everything had to be washed off with Clorox. It was really a bad thing. And what's interesting, even though this is a kind of civic front door to San Francisco, it is also right next to the Tenderloin, which is a very poor neighborhood filled with immigrants and also people who are living in SRO. So it's this kind of community that these kids really need a place to go. So when we started the design, and we were approached because we had never done a playground before, and she wanted it to be something that was very different, a piece of art, and also something that would really engage the kids. And so the mayor at the time, Ed Lee, who passed away before the park was done, really wanted it to be, he thought light would really bring life into the space. And so when we started talking about that, we decided that we would work with a light artist to help this piece activate this space. So we call these pixel poles. And but when I talk about movement, the movement really has to do with, as you walk by these, the lights actually turn on. So again, that activates it. And I think if you're walking by and suddenly the light goes on, you feel like you're engaging with something that's safe, and then it kind of pulls you across this plaza, because these two playgrounds are separated by the center point, this kind of in this Beaux-Arts plaza that aligns with the Civic Center itself. So these things, the play equipment is designed to be, it's like a Frei Otto bubble is the inspiration for it. Our structural engineer was very inspired by that. But also what it does is these circles become really interesting for the kids. They run up, and then the kids go crazy. And what's happened is that now they have, the amount of kids that come here has gone up tenfold. They get about 1,400 kids a month in the playground, and it is just like teeming with kids all the time. And what's great to me as I first came out there is that you see them screaming, ah! You just feel like when kids scream like that, they're really happy, and they're just like running. And so I think something about the circular movement has really been very positive. And then at night, in addition to the pixel poles that I said, the light travels across, in order to connect them, we worked with the artist to create an interactive light sculpture that will, when you move, it actually tracks you and follows you. So I'm going to play a video that shows the night before opening night, when the donor was there and people from the city Rec and Park Department. So, as I said, about a lot of our work is university work, institutional work, and this is the headquarters for a non-profit that does biofuel research. They're using grasses to create biofuels. So, so this is called the Energy Biosciences Building at UC Berkeley. And there's a large grade change from the street. You know, in the Bay Area, it's very hilly. There's an 11-foot grade change from the street to the front entry lobby there. So the idea was we had to create an accessible walkway for people in wheelchairs. So this actually comes like this, cuts through the landscape, and then this is a bike path that takes people through the site. And then there's a large stair here, and then an upper plaza. So what we wanted to do, you know, again, we use the native grass Nomo. It's about 4 or 5 kinds of native grass mixes that we use, and they don't need to be maybe cut back twice a year. And what's great about it with our drought issues in California, if we have a really bad drought, it won't die. It will just turn yellow for the summer, and then it will come back. So this was really important. And then also this movement through the site as you come up through here was really important, and we wanted to make that a really sculptural piece. And I think often when you see buildings on campuses, you don't know what they are, what's going on inside them. You have no idea. So we wanted to give a little clue for that. So these are this is a biodiesel molecule, ethanol, methanol. These are the different molecules, and we've actually inscribed them into the Corten steel retaining walls that go up and down the path. So as you're walking, you're kind of walking by the kind of what's happening inside the building. And then at night, they double as they're lit, and they double as lighting for the pathways. And then you can see a close-up of them. We do a lot with Corten. So this is a house that we did for a couple in San Francisco, and it was kind of interesting. It's at the top of Telegraph Hill, so it's already a big number of stairs to get. The front door is way up here, and the driveway was like this and then the garage was here, so there was no way it was very unsafe. So the architect decided to lower the garage 6 feet so that they could actually have a level spot to park pull out before they went to the top of the stairs. And there was a lovely little garden here, very little, right at the edge, but when we had to create another 12 stairs to get to the front door, it had to go away. So the idea was to make a garden where there could be none, and so we decided to use these overlooks to create that sense. And so you're looking over to the East Bay here, and this cliff goes down about 200 feet below you down there. And so when people come to, this is at the end of a dead end, so that people come here, the cars come up. There's actually a turnaround, like a turntable that turns the car, because there's no place to back up. And then the pedestrians come in here, they walk here. This is to kind of protect the car from backing into them. And then they come up here, and then they walk. There's a landing. They come up and they walk and they go up. So you can see that we've kind of, I wanted to break it up so that when you were here, you weren't like, oh my God, the death march, 25 feet to the front door. So I wanted to make it fun, and I also wanted to give you a place to rest on the way, but also to, what an incredible site, and have the opportunity to use something that you couldn't do anywhere else. And the client was he used to be the head of a video game company, and we've done like 4 or 5 projects for him, and he was really disappointed because the historic people wouldn't let them change the building, which wasn't any great building. And they said that he couldn't change it. So when we did this was like, oh wow, I can do something really fun that I couldn't do with the building. So the idea was to create this way that would be really fun and maybe a little scary to walk up. So you come in here, the pedestrian comes in here, and this is cantilevered over to get a little more room for the driveway. And then you can almost touch these eucalyptus trees, which are over 100 feet tall. So they're right there, and their bark is so beautiful, you just want to touch them. And then you move up here, and there's a little light that glows on the wall. This is the turnaround here. This is glass. And then as you come up, then you see the overhangs, the overlooks. And then at the base, you look up, and then you see, when you look at them this way, they just look like a series of walls. You don't really kind of see what's going to be happening at this viewpoint. And then you kind of come through this kind of constricted space that's lit from the sides with the Corten steel. And then you come up to the first balcony, and then you're there, you're looking at downtown San Francisco. And this is glass, but the way the light hits it, it doesn't look like glass. It looks like you could just walk off the edge, which I thought was really great, because I thought if you're going to do it, there should be some thrill, that it shouldn't feel too safe. So you kind of walk there, and you're kind of like, either, I know people who will not, they're like, I'm fine, I'm not going out there. And there's other people that just are drawn to the edge, like lemmings. And then to make it even scarier, it's grating underneath, so you're looking straight down. So he was thrilled. I mean, this was exactly what he wanted. And then sort of on the other end of the spectrum, kind of doing something that is meditative and quiet. This is a project we did at Stanford, which is, it's called the Windhover Center. And it's, there was an artist named Nathan Oliveira, who worked at Stanford for a long time, and he was a painter. And one of his patrons wanted to create a building on campus to celebrate a series of Nathan's works called the Windhover series, which is about kestrels in flight. And the paintings are as big as the screen there. They're very large paintings, and there are 5 paintings. And so she kept trying to find a home. For 20 years, she kept trying to find a home, and it didn't happen. But finally, they decided that they could find a place for it if it became a collaboration with the Dean of Religious Life, and it became a meditation center. And Stanford is a very high-pressure school, but when you're there, kids are on bikes or in shorts, everybody seems happy. You don't feel that kind of angst in the, and apparently that kind of dichotomy has been a problem. So they decided that they would make a place that kids could go to any time of the day or night, although it would be shut down in the, after midnight or something, but that they could also approach it and utilize it at other times. So the idea was to create, this was kind of a little mini competition, and so it was about setting this building here, which was in an old parking lot, and there's a dormitory here, and this is the New Guinea Sculpture Garden, which is kind of an amazing place if you ever go. And then this long building, we work with the architects, and I think one of the reasons this is so successful, it's won hundreds of awards. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's won a lot of awards. And I think it's because it's a great collaboration with landscape and architecture. And I remember the first day we went out there, and I was standing here with Joshua, the architect, and he had camped out on the site. He was so into it. And so I said, well, what are we going to do about the grade change? He said, what grade change? It's flat. I said, it's 4 feet from here to here. And he went, really? And he goes, oh my God. So actually what that ended up doing was the building is sort of raised up here, and this is sort of a sunken garden. And then as you come back, this water feature, this reflecting pool, is carved into the hill. And what we wanted to do is create this kind of feeling of walking, like a meditative walk, that you would shed all your cares as you walked to the front door. So there's a wall here, bikes park here, and you kind of meander through these ginkgo trees. You get to the front door, you look out, you see into this beautiful oak grove, which we're just right at the edge of it. You get these views through, you can walk through, and you can actually come out here to another terrace, and then you can come here, and the first thing you see when you come here is that this wall goes inside to outside, and that there are places for people to meditate here and here. Whoops, so anyway. Then the students who live in this dormitory can just continue on and go to here. So that's kind of how the space works. And so this is kind of the entry scrim. I mean, you can still see through it a little bit, which I think adds a measure of safety and feeling safe. But you can see that, that's what the first thing you see when you come to the building. Then you walk behind it, and you can see how the building's raised up here, and you're walking through, meandering through these ginkgo trees. This was taken a few years ago, so they've grown quite a bit. And then you're kind of pushed up against the building, against this beautiful rammed earth wall that just has, from the site soil, it just has this beautiful tonation. And then coming into the building, you see that wall on the inside going inside to outside with one of Nathan's paintings. And then you get this view out, and then again this corten with these openings between it, so you get, if someone's walking by, you can see them. And then we made our own sculpture out of stone we found at the boneyard they have at Stanford to kind of create a sculpture piece. We had a pretty tight budget on this, so we had to kind of be very creative. And so, so here's a place where somebody can be meditating, another person could be sitting on a bench here, hidden, and they are just, this reflecting pool is just very calm. And again, someone could be here at any time of the day or night. They don't have to go inside to see, to appreciate it. And then instead of benches, there are old hewn stones that also came from the boneyard. And you can see also that the perimeter is kind of, it's permeable, that this is bamboo, then you have the other wall. So again, it's not a solid box, but it feels very permeable in places. And then I think what's really beautiful is that, which, it's just that the wind, the shadows fall across this wall at different times of the day and actually create this really active, where you see the trees moving, and it kind of amplifies nature. And then the water, sometimes the light hits the water and bounces here, and you can see the movement of water on that overhang. There's a rain chain going into this little rain garden as you walk around the building, and then someone walking to the dormitory would pass by and see the sculpture. And then as you walk around the building, this is the oak woodland that it's facing out to. And this is, and then you can see how the building, because it's raised up, you start to get this sense of this kind of Japanese sunken courtyard, but still high enough, it's high enough that someone could, or low enough that someone could sit here and enjoy and sit there. And we even work with them on the roof so that the trees kind of come right through the roof. And then looking out through these louvers, you get a sense of the oak trees as part of the meditation. And then this is this little Japanese garden with another piece from the boneyard that we turned into a fountain. So it's this kind of very, kind of meditative and quiet. And then finally, there's a walking labyrinth that is the labyrinth that is the same pattern as Chartres Cathedral and also Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And so that becomes a place that the students can walk and kind of chill out. Most of our work is in California, but this project, we were called by a woman who used to have a store on, I think it was on Fifth Avenue. Her name's Linda Dresner, and she lives in Michigan. And so this was outside of Detroit, and we were called to work with her on this project. So the house looks like a museum. It's very, very stark, and it needed a lot of softening. So when we came on, they had already started the construction. And so the idea is that as you approach it, you come up that driveway, and then you turn here, and there's a garage in the back. This is the front entry, and then we did this layering of taxus and arborvitae, and then taxus here, and then river birch that form a very light scrim in front of the building. And then this is a Rus aromatica, the dwarf low planting in front. And so you come up here, and there's little blue stem grasses, and then a sculpture here to kind of draw you up, because actually the front door is there. Who would know? So we put this here to kind of draw you, and then so you walk in, and then there you're getting closer to the front door, and the hedges behind hide. This is like a very normal suburban neighborhood. This is a very unusual house for that neighborhood. And then looking back over the little blue stem, which again, is you might expect something like this on a house like this to be, if it was like Dan Kiley, it would be like green ground cover over the whole thing, but we wanted to kind of bring it and soften it and make it feel kind of like it's changing all the time. And then this is the front door looking back out. There's a little vestibule, and you're looking back out to the landscape to a park across the street. This is taken at dawn. And then walking around the building, you see these river birch and you're kind of coming around here, and you can see the house kind of floating above. And then at the end is a little sculpture garden. This is a bench where you can sit. And then here's that bench. And then this is the kitchen and dining room are over here. And so this is the walkway you've just come on, and this is this little sculpture garden. And then this is where the family enters from the right. And so they come in here and they walk to the front door here. So we kind of did this arrangement of hardscape and softscape. So they can walk to the front door. This is a heated path during the winter, so that they can get to the front door. And then this idea of this just, a very sort of quiet sculpture garden. So this is the plan. So is the driveway's here and the garage is here. It's the front stairs, the entrance, this alley of trees, and then as you come around, this was that sculpture garden, and you can see here this is an earlier design because it got changed. So one of the things is, since this is the kitchen and this is a dining room, and no one I know parks their car in the garage all the time. So if they have a car parked here, you're looking right out at the car. So I said to Linda, I think we need to have a hedge there. So when we do these designs, we do everything in 3 dimensions pretty early on, these kind of crude, kind of working with SketchUp. So this is a low hedge here that kind of hides the foreground and the paving. And then this hedge was going to hide the garage and hide the cars. And I thought this was the best idea. And so this was it modeled. You can see, this was a little higher. We actually lowered it. But, again, this would screen it and give you a sense of privacy. Linda didn't like that idea at all. She thought she was like, I don't want a hedge. And I don't know if it's because the hedge was just too formal. And Linda kept showing us pictures of things she liked, like Anselm Kiefer, like post-apocalyptic landscapes. And I was like, and she liked that tension between this beautiful, pristine house and something really messy and kind of post-industrial. So then she said to me, I went to Brazil and I saw this sculpture piece by this guy, Chris Burden, and I think we should do something like that. And this was a piece he did where he dropped beams. It's called Beam Drop. And you can watch a video on YouTube. And over the course of 24 hours, they dropped these beams into like a 5-foot bed of concrete. And at night, it starts to you see like sparks as they hit each other. And it's totally random. And I'm sure that was a really important part of it. But this was the idea. And so I thought, wow, that's interesting. How are we going to do that? So we worked with the architect, and we actually drew up something that looked like it had been dropped, but it wasn't. And this became, and she just loved it. This was the best thing. This was, So it creates a sense, you could still see the cars behind, but it creates a scrim, and it creates a layering. And since she lives outside of Detroit, there was lots of old metal I-beams around that we could use. And then this is kind of as you walk in the front door. So, some of the kind of wackiest, and actually sometimes some of those interesting ideas we have come from clients, and I really like that part of it. I would never in 100 years have thought of this. Oops, I think, So this is the last project I'm going to show, and this is a house we did up in the wine country, and the architect was Michael Maltzin, who's used to work for Frank Gehry, and he's a very accomplished architect who lives in LA. And so this is the house here, and you approach it from this driveway, and you drive through the vineyard on one side with olive trees, and then this is a salmon creek here. So all the planting on the left side is all natives because the Fish and Game said we had to do that, and it also seemed like the right thing to do. Then as you approach, the garage is here where the family comes in, and then you kind of have this moment where if you're walking, you can walk through here, and then you can walk out here and go into the vineyard. And then there's also a meditative walk here. And then the final piece that we did, which is actually just got constructed last spring, was this piece when this client is a very big art collector, and she purchased a Kusama cube, one of those mirrored cubes. So anyway, I'll just kind of go through it. So This is the driveway, and this is a Boutilua, and then a Joel Shapiro piece. And then you're driving through the gravel driveway as you kind of get your first glimpse of the house. And then we have the Calamagrostis Carl Forster, and you kind of meander your way through the grasses up to this olive terrace. And the whole house is built up like on a plinth. And then looking back from that plinth back, you see the riparian area with the native plantings, and then the olive trees. We brought all the trees in. We brought in a lot of olive trees here. And then this is a dwarf olive called Little Ollie, and this is another native grass that we've used for a lawn substitute. And then you see, you kind of come up. These are 100-year-old olives that we get from far north in California for old orchards that are no longer viable. So we moved 4 of those in there to create a little bosque of trees. And then you can see, and so then there's, she set up some furniture here, and a lot of times when I'm there, we'll have lunch out on this terrace. And then this is the furniture sitting in that lower area, which is a shameless plug, as we designed some landscape forms. And so we had these, so this is actually from a photo shoot that we did there. And then you can see the furniture there, and then you kind of see coming around, and then turning to the right, you can see this is the entryway that goes into the vineyard, and you know, it's California, so we have bocce ball court. You have to have a bocce ball court. And then this is walking up to the house. And some of these trees were planted to actually block views of distant architecture she didn't want to see. And then you can see the house, which is, this is Escalonia, which does really well in the clay soil of the Napa Valley. So these bars kind of come out and kind of mitigate the grade change. So, and then this fence is covered with Parthenocissus, and I like the Parthenocissus because the leaf is very similar to a grape leaf, and so it kind of blurs that boundary from the domestic landscape to the agricultural landscape. And you know, you've got vehicles and trailers going up and down here all the time. And then we did another labyrinth. She wanted a meditative walk, so we moved this in with these boxwoods and olives, and this is kind of a little hidden space. And so there is that meditative walk. And then this area this is a septic leach field, so for a long time we weren't quite sure what to do, and she had some ideas, and she's adding a building there now. So we wanted to do, so she told me that she bought this sculpture, and I don't know if any of you have gone to see the Kusama cubes, those infinity rooms, where you walk inside at museums, and you're like millions of lights coming around, you stay in there for 5 minutes and you go out. And so she had bought one, and I think it was in London. And so she's a patron of the American Academy in Rome, and so she has spent a lot of time in Rome, and she was really impressed by the Galleria Spado, which was designed by Borromini. And this idea of, you can see it's a false perspective. So if someone were standing here, a person, they'd be like that tall. So what it does is this, because it's elevated and it gets smaller as you go towards the end, and also the columns get closer together. It creates this very deceptive sense of scale of space that exaggerates the size of the length of that. So she said, well, why don't we try and do that on the landscape? So this is a Kusama now in place, and it's raised 30 inches above the ground, and the trees are getting closer together as you move towards the cube. And there's a very narrow walkway. You can walk here and you can walk into it. And then what happens, this is one of the other infinity rooms. I didn't have a picture from the inside, but what happens is there's little tiny holes in it, and the light bounces around inside and gives very similar effect to this when you go inside. And then here it is, we planted sunflowers around it in the summer, so it actually becomes a mirror of the landscape around and the beautiful views. So that is the end of the lecture, and I hope that I've made you see that by helping people negotiate landscape and walk through it and kind of create and understand the kind of the ephemeral qualities of nature and this sort of engagement, I'm hoping that they have a deeper understanding in landscape and the environment, and that it causes them to actually appreciate things more. So hopefully through our work that we've been successful in that. So thank you very much.
We have time for a few questions, so if anybody has questions, we'll take 2 or 3 questions from the audience for Andrea. If not, yes.
How was that fog created?
It's little tiny misters. You know, there's a company called MeFog, and there's little tiny atomizers, and it's high pressure, and and the water's filtered so it doesn't clog it, and it just it flows out. Yes.
I think there's ordinances in California to put solar on buildings and so on. Have you worked at all with canopies or lighting or such things?
Well, most of the time we've used them. If it's a bigger property, they're kind of off on their own, but often they're on the roofs of the buildings. So typically that's part of the architecture. But yeah, we've used that a lot. And also for heating pools, like solar hot water. So all of that. I mean, we have very strict energy codes in California, and also water use. So it's becoming increasingly regulated, especially after years of drought. Thank you. Oh, one more, okay.
I'm just curious, with that park that you did in San Francisco, what happened to the homeless people? Did they suddenly disappear?
Well, you know what happened? A couple things happened. It actually has been very successful. It feels much safer. I mean, it did not eradicate that, but it doesn't feel as predatory. They did 2 things. Is they started working with community groups to create I guess you could call them like security guards, but they're not, you know, they kind of, like, people are there during the day when the kids are there. I think the lights at night have done a lot. And then they're also across the way is UN Plaza. There's also been a lot of initiatives there to make that safer. So I think, and then the donor actually gave another donation to put a cafe on the corner. So that has also created, it feels more equalized. It doesn't feel like you're entering a homeless encampment. It now feels like it's a place for everyone. And I think that, you know, there will always be people there that, but I think that the drug problem's a lot better. Kids, you know, no one's allowed in those playgrounds at night, you know, but, you know, and because someone's patrolling, they're not in there shooting up. So it actually has, it feels a lot safer. I go by there now, and, you know, with the lights, I see people walking. I feel like it's much safer, and I think a lot of people would agree that it's been a big success. And, you know, we always wondered that. You know, you can't attack something, a big social problem, with just design. So I think on all these fronts, all these different groups coming together to try and make it better, I think it has. So. You know, fingers crossed.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.